Hi, I'm Lori Wolf. I'm with the NSRWA and the Water Smart program. Garden Green Expo is sponsored by NSRWA and the Water Smart program, as well as Kennedy's Country Gardens. Before we get started, I just want to go over a couple things. We're going to do a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, either type them in the chat or the Q&A, and then I will read them at the end. And then if I have anything to say to you, I'll put it in the chat as well. Now I would like to introduce Blake Dinius of the Plymouth County Extension with When the Lights Go Out, The Secrets World of Fireflies.
All right, thank you. And welcome. Good evening, everyone. So glad to be here. I love working with the NSRWA. You guys do a ton of great work. And I look forward to the Gardening Green Expo every single year. This is a really great effort. Laurie Wolf is amazing. She just does amazing stuff, and she's done a fantastic job with this. So um, let's go ahead and get started. So today we're going to talk about fireflies, and it's actually a topic that I think like many things in the insect world, it's one of those things, the more you dig, the more fascinating it becomes. And so my hope is that at the end of this presentation, you all are more interested and excited and motivated to kind of go out there and understand fireflies and go look for them. And I know that like right now, I mean, the weather has been a little bit better, but we just kind of came out of that snowstorm back in, a few weeks ago. I know it might be really hard to think about fireflies right now, but I want you to just kind of close your eyes and pretend, just for a second. Think about maybe this warm summer evening, maybe sometime late June, early July, maybe a little bit muggy. Feels really, really warm right now and humid, and the the scent in the air is filled with that nice aroma of flowers, maybe fresh cut grass, and it's just a really lovely time. And then if you can kind of open your eyes if you had been closing them. I don't want to put you to sleep. We're not here to do that. I know it is getting late, but um, you might see in your yard, maybe just as the sun is setting, small lights, fireflies blinking in and out, letting you know that, life is out there. And this is a photo that was taken on one of my firefly walks in Miles Standish. And this is kind of represents what we call a flash train firefly. You can see that a little, it's actually not, it looks like it might be more than one firefly, but it's a single firefly making a bunch of different flashes. Just a really amazing. And when you see the photographer who took this photo, she called it like a Christmas tree firefly, I believe. And it is an amazing sight. And if you get the opportunity to go out on one of these walks, and again in the summer, leading a few of them, you might be able to see these Christmas tree fireflies lighting up the sky, and it does feel a lot like Christmas in the middle of summer. But I get the question, especially after having shown that photo, very often from people about where have all the fireflies gone. People just wonder, they say that back in the old days when they were around, there used to be fireflies everywhere. And now when they go outside, they don't see hardly any. And this is, I'm not saying that they're not telling the truth. I think that for a number of reasons that fireflies are slowly disappearing and fading out. But I do want to talk about why that's the case. But before we can kind of get into some of the causes for why fireflies are going away, I think what is really, really important and critical for any of these types of conservation measures is that we focus and learn about what it is that we're trying to protect. So what exactly are fireflies? And I love this photo. This is a photo I took, I believe it was 2 years ago. It was a firefly on my canoe, and you can see this firefly. It's not mold or anything like that on this firefly. That's pollen. So if anyone wants to know if fireflies are pollinators, that firefly is loaded with pollen. So they are pollinators. That is something that they are. But I think it's like I said, if you wanted to save dogs, right? You need to know what a dog is. You need to know what it needs. It needs food and water, shelter, oxygen. I think it's important to think of fireflies the same way, and insects as well. It's not just these nebulous things that just need saving, but think about what are their needs? What are their individual needs? What do fireflies eat? How can we provide them more food? Where do they live? What kinds of shelter do they need? All of these things kind of play a role because if we want to protect them and we want to save them, we need to know the answers to these questions. So the first thing is that fireflies are beetles. Even though we call them fireflies, in some cases people call them lightning bugs. Sometimes you might hear them referred to as glowworms. They are, from an entomology perspective, they are considered beetles. And I love this photo. It's not a photo I took. There are several photos here that are not mine, but you can see this firefly has that sheathed wing, a lot like a beetle. People call it the hard shell of a beetle, but that's actually one of their wings called elytra. And you can see their back wing is what they're flying with. And these are soft. Unlike other beetles, they're very, very soft. But you can see exactly kind of the similarities between maybe you could see that like the ladybug in that top photo, where it's got the elytra spread out and the wings in the back. Fireflies are very much related to these organisms. But the firefly life cycle is also something that is quite surprising because the part of the life cycle that we see and that we're familiar with and that we call the adult, the firefly, that is only alive for about 3 to 4 weeks in a lot of species. It's alive for a very, very short period of time. Very similar to if you're familiar with bees and native bees, those are generally active for about 3 weeks or so out of the entire year. But unlike native bees, fireflies can live for up to 2 years as larvae. So the native bees undergo a life cycle that takes about a year. The firefly life cycle can take up to 2 years, where they spend up to 102 weeks. That's not days, that's weeks as a larva, just doing larval things, eating and moving around and hiding and trying to stay protected. So when it comes to firefly conservation, right, the most important part of this entire life cycle is that larval stage, that stage that we don't really see that much, that is hidden outside of our own perspective. So you can see, like, this is what a firefly larva looks like. It doesn't look at all like what you might imagine a firefly to look like. It looks a little bit like an alien creature. I think they're adorable. I think they're really cool. And got this really interesting pink and black color. They're really interesting, and they spend this life cycle uh, primarily eating, and they'll feed on a variety of different types of things. I apologize if you just ate dinner and this photo might be a little bit gross, like a firefly sucking on some boogers or something. But this firefly, they'll eat things that are other. They're also soft-bodied, so they'll eat earthworms, they'll eat slugs, snails, other small insect larvae, and I don't have an exact figure on how much they eat, but what I've been told is that they may eat up to over the 2 years they may eat about an earthworm a week or so. So you can kind of think about that. Just tiny little larvae going through these earthworms or going through these snails and slugs and things like that. Uh, Kind of interesting to see, and they do it in quite a disgusting way where they'll liquefy the insides of this organism and slowly suck it out. These larvae, what they really require in terms of shelter, though, in terms of environment, is a moist, humid environment. So when you think about, I don't know, Jurassic Park, like that feeling of being in Jurassic Park, where you've got that kind of primordial environment where it's humid and wet and damp and warm and all that stuff that you might think of, that's what fireflies love. And some of them will spend a lot of their time either in or near water, or they'll be maybe underground as well. And they really need that moisture. They really need that humidity. They really need to move around. And I'm saying this too, and I'm saying it with a degree of uncertainty as well, because for a lot of firefly larvae, believe it or not, despite the fact that it is the most important part of the firefly life cycle in terms of conservation, we don't know a lot about the vast majority of firefly larval species out there. So while we may know what their adults look like and how their adults act, there are firefly larvae that we have never seen, the larvae of certain adults that we have never seen before. And it's just an interesting notion to we're making these generalizations about these firefly larvae right now. I am, at least. And we still don't know a lot of information about it. It's something that is, if you want to go back to school, or if you know someone who wants to go into firefly research or something, that's kind of some low-hanging fruit, is learning about the firefly larva. So once again, like, I mean, you can think about these fireflies underground or under leaves, which is one of the reasons why a lot of people will say things like, leave the leaves throughout the winter, leave the leaves on the ground. Not only is that really important for native plants and bees, it's also really important for fireflies as well. And just like other beetles, they go through a pupal stage. So they're going to go through what we, as an entomologist, will call complete metamorphosis. In the same way you can think of a caterpillar changing into a butterfly, this firefly larva will pupate, and it takes about 3 weeks. And after that, it will become an adult. And again, this adult stage is very brief. Most of them do not eat at this stage. Although it does beg the question as to what was that firefly that was covered in that pollen doing with pollen on its body if it's not at least taking nectar or doing something similar. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. But from what I understand, some of them may take some amount of nectar or sap, but they primarily they aren't required to eat and they don't really eat. Maybe it's just a reflex. I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure on that. So this adult stage is all about finding love. So this adult stage that they kind of go through, it's all about mating. So while they don't necessarily eat a lot, their primary focus in the 3 to 4 weeks is to reproduce and lay eggs. And they don't do it kind of the way that you might think that we do it. So how is it that fireflies attract one another? They flash each other. But I apologize for the dad humor. Um, but it's actually true. So if a female, so what they're gonna do is they're flashing that we like to see is more. It's not just for our eyes. It's for their own benefit. The males will flash, and that communicates to the females, and the females will flash back. So the male might flash something like this. Those might be male flashes, and you can see that the female flash might be a little bit more subtle in the bottom right corner, subtle, demure, and the female is signaling back to that male that she's interested. Now, unfortunately, there isn't a really good way for these males to know that that female was flashing specifically back at them. And a lot of them just think, even if they do think that maybe that female might have been flashing at another male, they might think, well, I'm going to take my chances anyways. Maybe once she sees me instead of just my flashing, she might be interested, or maybe I can bully this other male out of the scene, and maybe she might like me instead. And so when that female flashes back, she's going to get a lot of suitors that are going to come mobbing her from that point on. But that's typically the idea is that the males, it's a lot like birds. They're communicating to each other in the sky when it's dark outside. And there are many kinds of fireflies. Like this right here, this firefly right here is what we call a photinus firefly. But we have over 2,000 species of fireflies worldwide and over 120 in North America. And once again, fireflies are one of those types of organisms that we still don't know everything about them. And there could be fireflies in your own backyard that we don't, brand new species that we have never seen before, larvae of these firefly species that we have never seen before. Um, and one of the ways you can tell certain species apart is by the way that they communicate with each other. And so a lot of fireflies, on the outside, morphologically, will look very, very similar. But the way that they differentiate themselves from each other is by the pattern of flashing that they have. And you can see here, this is just a diagram that I've copied. It shows a few different ways that fireflies are communicating. Like you can see on the top, it's what we call the Big Dipper firefly. It does almost this reverse J pattern that gets bigger and bigger. And you can see that the interval increases, the time between those flashes increases with this top firefly. And the shape is very different from, say, the firefly below, where it's just a steady flicker effect, or maybe just a steady blink. And then you see the one below that will have a triple pulse, right? One, 3 pulses and then a break, 3 pulses and a break. And so all of these, it's a little bit like Morse code. And so when you go out at night, you might see flashes all around you. And just knowing that once you can differentiate between the different flashes, that all these different species kind of come out, and you might realize that you have a lot more diversity in your backyard. And it's just kind of an amazing experience. When we lead these firefly walks over the summer, we typically see about 4 or 5 different species, and it's a lot of fun just kind of going through them. There's also differences in the color of the flash as well. Like this is showing a yellow flash, for instance. but there are greenish flashes, there are reddish flashes, there are orangey flashes, and there are even flashes that people report as being blue. They're not around here, but down further south, there we have what we call the blue ghost firefly. And what we've learned is that it's not really blue. It has to do with the fact that it's our eyes playing tricks on us. It's the way it's that the firefly comes out at just the right time at night when our eyes have trouble discerning different colors, and so it plays a trick on our own eyes and makes the light look blue. But there are indeed different colors, like they are indeed emitting different light from different parts of the light spectrum as well. So I do kind of want to walk you through the different types of flashes. So there are some fireflies, for instance, that will just give a single flash, a single pulse, and there might be a 4 or 5 second interval between that. And we have a couple flashes around here, like Photinus ignitus is one of the fireflies that we have around here that will just give a single pulse. And then we have the special flashes, which are again like the J-shaped flashes, like Photinus borealis. We have the flickers, which are just what we call like a really rapid flash. This might be really hard to see at night. Is this flicker almost looks like a light going out? We have what we call paired flash fireflies, where it might be two pulses back to back, and then a long period of what we call the dark phase, where there's no flash. It just is two paired flashes, dark phase, two paired flashes, and then a dark phase. We have what we call the flash trains, and people really love these flash train fireflies. They just kind of go, it's like a little bit like a flicker, but slower, and it just it makes it look like there's a lot more fireflies than there really are, but people just really like that. And then we have our glows, and this is when the firefly just kind of holds that flash for a long period of time. And this is important, the way that these, not only is the way that these fireflies communicate, does that tell the female the species, but how strongly they flash and how quickly they flash can also indicate to the female how fit that male is. So the female might cue in on a particular type of firefly flash. Like if the male is flashing very rapidly, she might really like that in some of the flicker species, for instance. Or if the male has a very bright flash, she might really like that as well. So there's all these different ways that the females are measuring whether or not this male is worthy of her time based on the way that he's flashing. And that has a lot to do with, the types of food that they got as a male as well as what we call a nuptial gift. So the male will actually give this female what we call it's like a package that it's really kind of gross. It's not something that you would want someone to give you, but it's like a liquidy like a package that he's going to transfer to her. It's like a gelatinous package and it's filled with all kinds of nutrients. And so he'll pass that on to her. And when he's got a really big nuptial gift, she likes that a lot. So how do they make their flashes? Well, it's all chemistry, and it has to do with this molecule that they have. It's an enzyme, and it's called luciferase, kind of like the angel of light, Lucifer. And the idea is that this luciferase is going to pair with another molecule called luciferin in the presence of magnesium. It's going to take ATP, and the enzyme, the ATP, the magnesium, the luciferin in the presence of oxygen is what's going to produce light. And once again, like it can be multiple different colors, and slight changes in the luciferase molecule is what's going to produce the different types of light. So you can have the orange or the yellow or the green based on the shape of luciferase. Even though we're calling it luciferase, there can be many different kinds of it can be slightly changed from species to species. So if you think this is all confusing, I don't know if you've read your children's text messages lately. I find that this is a little bit easier for me to understand than just a whole slew of emojis coming down the pipeline. So another reason why fireflies flash is to be able to warn other organisms. If you are something that is poisonous, like take for instance this poison dart frog, you can advertise that in a multitude, in a very specific way, right? You can be a multitude of different colors, right? You can be these bright oranges and these blues, and things will learn very quickly. Don't eat the thing that looks very bright and blue and spotted. That thing looks poisonous. You can even ask like young children. You can say, "Oh, this monarch butterfly is orange. Why do you think it's orange?" And people say it's poisonous. It's almost like something you learn very quickly and you remember it. Kind of in the same way that I remember what a Captain Morgan's bottle looks like. It's something that I do not like, does not agree with me, and has a visceral reaction when I see a bottle of that. But when you are an organism at night, like say for a firefly or a larva that is underground, how helpful do you think warning coloration is? And the answer is it's not very helpful. So you might need another way to communicate to organisms that you are poisonous. And they can do that by glowing. So another characteristic of fireflies that separates them from other types of beetles is that they have this glowing stage. And all fireflies at least glow during the larval stage. You can even see the pupa at the top right, that is glowing as well. It looks like when you used to have those glow in the dark toys as a child. Now, some fireflies may lose this ability to flash as an adult, but they all possess it as larvae, at least as far as we know. So they are toxic. So this is one thing one of the reasons why they're doing this is they're trying to advertise their toxicity, because fireflies are both distasteful, they smell bad, they look like they're poisonous, and they are indeed poisonous. And they have what we call in their bodies a chemical called lucibufficins. And these lucibufficins, they work on many, many, many different types of animals. And this has evolved in a number of different poisonous animals a number of different times through the process of convergent evolution, where many animals have followed different paths to get to a similar endpoint, because these lucibufficins are very toxic to a variety of animals. But you can see like that they have very similar appearances, and so they're going to advertise again. Like you look at this and you see the oranges, the yellows. This is going to be something you're going to learn very quickly is not something that you want to eat. And what we have are three kind of different types that I would kind of classify as night flying fireflies. On the left, you have the photinus fireflies that are usually more yellow flashed, and you have the middle is the pyractomina fireflies, which are typically a more orangey red firefly, and then you have the ones on the right, the futurus fireflies, which are really really cool. They emit almost like a mint green kind of flash, but they're very tricky because they mimic other firefly flashes, and I'll get into why in a little bit. But you also have things that mimic fireflies. Like these are not fireflies, even though they look very, very similar. But they're all trying to advertise kind of the same thing: is that they don't want something to eat it. And you can see here, if you look closely at the front of them, it looks a little bit different than what you see here. That's what we call the pronotum. We see the pronotum in fireflies covers just about the entire head of the firefly. It's a little bit more like a popped collar or some kind of neck brace in these other types of beetles. But sometimes warning coloration, poison, flashing doesn't work. And that is for this specific firefly we call it the Photurus firefly. And these are a very interesting firefly. If you look at this firefly, you might notice that it has very large legs, very long legs. And this firefly, it is a predatory firefly. So this does eat as an adult. And what it feeds on are other fireflies. And so when you have, and it's really interesting. So when you see the flashing going on, you've got the males communicating with the females and the females communicating back. And what might throw you for a loop too is that sometimes you have males that might communicate like a female to trick other males. And then you might have these females of a different species communicating like the female of another species to lure those males to it. So there's this whole drama. It's like worse than a soap opera playing out right in front of your eyes. You've got the males pretending to be females, you got the females pretending to be females of other species. And if these female photurists, if they trick one of those desperate males into coming over, they're gonna take that male out for dinner. And they don't. I don't mean it that they're gonna buy dinner for the male. They're gonna eat that male, and what they're looking to do is sequester and capture some of those poisons that male has. So she's gonna eat that male and take some of those lucibufficins, keep them in her body. That's gonna protect her, but she's also gonna use those to protect her eggs as well. So when her babies hatch, it's all because of the males that she ate as an adult female. So she's really just a good mama. But if you can imagine being one of those males, probably shocking, probably a very surprising thing that you're not going to live to tell other people about. Then we have the day flying species, and we actually suspect that these day flying fireflies evolved as a means to escape from the Photuris fireflies. And these day flying fireflies, sometimes people call them dark fireflies, and they still flash as or still glow as larvae, but these adult fireflies, they they mostly rely on pheromones. And what you can see about them is that their antennae are much larger than other firefly antennae, and their eyes are somewhat more reduced in that they're not as keen on picking up different flash patterns. And so that's kind of the way that they'll reproduce. And the firefly on the right is called the winter firefly. So this is a very odd firefly where not only is it a day flying firefly, but it's also active like right now. You could go outside and you might be able to check out like a maple tree or an oak tree, and you might look on the bark and you might see these fireflies. They look like a little bit like sunflower seeds on the sides of the bark. It's a pretty fun firefly to kind of go out and look for, but they do not flash as adults. And spiders. So there are other organisms that eat fireflies, assassin bugs, and spiders, harvestmen as well. We know that spiders are probably one of the biggest predators of fireflies, and for some reason the lucibufigans just don't really affect them. But spiders, we actually found, will not only lure fireflies to their demise, or no, not only eat fireflies, but they'll also lure other fireflies to their demise. In this study from 2024, they found that spiders would actually capture a male and then force that male to flash like a female, and that male is going to bring in even more fireflies into that spider's web. So they're kind of devious about what they're doing with these male fireflies, and it's kind of interesting. And so the life of a male firefly is pretty tough. In one particular study, one firefly researcher went out and looked at male fireflies, followed them for days, and found that at the end of that journey, when he was looking at these fireflies, about two of those males had mated, and about two had been eaten by spiders. So out of all these fireflies they looked at, the odds are not looking very good for these male fireflies meeting up with females. It's a tough life to be a male out there. So if you think your dating life is tough, then you're not a firefly. So how does this all relate to you? What are some of the things that you can do now that we kind of understand the firefly biology and the firefly life cycle, their needs, what they're eating, what's going on? Well, the first and foremost thing that you want to focus on, at least right now, in my opinion, is reducing the amount of light pollution in the area. What we're learning more and more is that light pollution is not just a separate thing from regular pollution. It is just as bad as other types of pollution. And we're finding that it impacts everything from like the circadian rhythms of different other insects, not just fireflies, but moths and bees. Some things that fly during the day are still impacted by light at night. So it impacts so many different things. But if you could imagine being a firefly and your whole means of reproducing and communicating with something else is to look for these small, dim flashes at night, and you're being just blinded, it's like almost trying to join a dating website and being on old 56K dial up, if you can remember that, and the messages back and forth are just being blocked and you're not being able to see them or read them. You're not going to know if anyone's interested in you. It's the same idea. If you're a firefly and you're relying on these small flashes at night and it's just being drowned out by the lights that are happening, it's one of the small things that we can do by reducing light, that it doesn't cost you anything to turn off your lights. And you can just do that. It's absolutely free, and it'll actually save you money. Not too much, especially now because we have these high efficiency light bulbs, but it still will save you some money. And most importantly, it's going to save you. It's going to save the fireflies. But I just kind of going into just how bad light pollution has been getting. This was a study from not a firefly researcher, but an astronomer, and they estimated that sky glow has increased. What we call sky glow is this diffuse radiation of light. So not light that is directly shining at your eyes, but maybe light that is happening all the way from, say, like Colony Place down in Plymouth, might be radiating outward, or a nearby parking lot. If you're in Boston, you've got Fenway Stadium and things like that. These lights are like a Walmart that's nearby. The light kind of radiates outward and makes the overall sky much brighter. And we estimate that this is increasing very dramatically. We At least from this study, the researchers estimated that it's increasing about 10.5% every single year. And this quote, it really kind of drove home just how bad that this actually is. This person said, children born today in a light polluted area who can see about 250 stars would see sky glow quadruple by their 18th birthday, leaving only 100 stars to wish on. If you can imagine, like my kids are 5 and 6, and if they look up at the sky knowing that they're going to have less than half those stars when they're 18, it's just kind of like, if the fireflies don't motivate you to save them, the moths don't motivate you to save them. Maybe the stars will as well. And you can see here just like how dramatic these are heat maps showing how much light pollution is happening around the country. I mean, you look at the 1950s where we have these dark areas around the United States, and then 2025, virtually like all of the Northeast is so much more dramatic in terms of like, and this includes even places like Maine and stuff, like it goes really far up. You might think of Maine as being really dark, but it's even there, it's getting much worse. So it's really really hard to find dark areas around the United States anymore. Just kind of another example of a house there's someone who took a photo under the normal circumstances of sky glow, and then when there was a power outage in the area, and you can see just how dramatic the sky glow is, just how hard it is to see the lights, not the lights, the stars when the lights are on. So the next thing that fireflies need, like many other things, is clean habitat. And you can thank, again, like the North and South Rivers Watershed Association, any of these conservation organizations are doing really great work, is that the fireflies need these clean, protected wetlands, and they need to be protected for a long time. Sometimes someone will say to me, they'll say, oh, I don't have fireflies in my yard. I had them last summer, but I don't have them this year. Now, remember, the firefly lifestyle can be up to 2 years, right? So they need that environment protected, not just for, not just no mow May, and not just one day out of the year, or not just Earth Day, or whatever you're going to do. They need it for 2 full years. They need that protected habitat. So really, really important. If you look at this photo at the top left, what they also really, really like is shrubby vegetation to perch on. So everything that looks like messy, unkempt yards, a little bit like a wicked witch's house, that's what they like. That's what they want. And they also want that to be free of pollutants. Like when you look at this is an example of a man who's spraying for mosquitoes. And he is spraying for ticks and mosquitoes, but he is spraying 100% firefly habitat right there. So that's exactly, he's spraying that like directly, right? And so a lot of times when people get these yard sprays, that's what they're targeting. They're targeting this shrubby, brushy area with like taller grass and vegetation. That's what fireflies like to perch on. That's where they like to live. A lot of times this shrubby habitat has higher moisture, higher like relative humidity. And so that's where you're going to find them. Now, what I do in my own yard, for example, is first off, I don't do any yard sprays. But secondly, I let portions of my grass grow in. So I don't just do a no mow May. What I do is I leave that section of my yard, I let that grow in for the entire summer. And I will tell you this, that the fireflies are loaded in my yard. I do not have this disappearing firefly problem. I have so many fireflies that you just go outside. The mosquitoes are a little bit of a problem, but we live with that. And but we do have tons of fireflies. And so what we found is just mowing less frequently. Again, something that costs you $0, and not spraying, not getting a yard spray. $0 costs you $0 to not get a yard spray. Mowing less frequently costs you $0 to do. And what this study showed is that what they called frequent mowing, I think people would still consider infrequent, but what they called frequent mowing is mowing greater than 50% of your yard every 2 weeks. And I know I've got neighbors that mow every single week. But if you mow, what they want is people mowing less than every 2 weeks and mowing less than half their yard. And what they found is that you'll have more fireflies if you do that. So the less you need to mow and the less you mow, the more fireflies you're going to see. So if you want to think about an excuse to kind of do less work, think about it like saving fireflies. So if your partner comes home and they say, honey, you didn't mow the lawn, you didn't do any yard work, You just tell them that you're saving the fireflies, and you ask them what they did all day. So, some future reading, if you like the idea of wanting to protect fireflies and you want to know more of them, uh, highly recommend these two books. They're fantastic. There's not a ton of firefly literature out there just kind of for lounging and for relaxing. A lot of it is either scientific studies or it's geared towards really young children. But I thought these hit a really good spot where they're good for really people of all different ages, and they're just a wonderful kind of introduction into the world of fireflies. The one on the left is a little bit more of an identification guide, and then the one on the right is, I think that the best way to describe the one on the right as a love story to fireflies. And it's just, you can tell that this Sarah Lewis is just completely enamored with the world of fireflies, and it's just a wonderful book. Highly recommend both of them. They're both fantastic resources. But if you do, uh, if you do the right things and you do care about fireflies, fireflies are incredibly resilient and they have been on this planet for millions of years. It is possible to go to areas around the county and see fireflies. This is a walk that we led a number of years ago at Wildlands Trust, and we saw all these fireflies. I mean, this is what you could be seeing in your own backyard. Is this? It is entirely possible. And I'm just going to leave you with this last quote. Once in a while, you get shown the light in the strangest of places if you look just right. And at this point, I'll take any questions that people might have regarding fireflies. I hope that you all enjoyed the presentation. Thank you so much for your time and for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you.
We do have some questions and some comments. The first one is, do they eat jumping worms?
A lot of people have been asking that at this whenever I've given this presentation, and I've looked at the research, and there's nothing there. So people presumably have not looked at whether or not they eat jumping worms. But presumably they do. I think I saw one study from a couple years ago, and that's basically what they said. They said presumably they eat these invasive jumping worms, but no one, as far as I know, has actually looked at that and actually done a study on it to see if they control jumping worms. I mean, jumping worms also might have a negative impact in the way that they change the soil. So if you're a larval firefly and you live in the soil and the jumping worms are changing that soil structure, maybe that's having a negative impact on the fireflies. I'm not sure.
Okay,
It's
go ahead.
no, that's it.
Okay. The next one is just a comment. Light pollution is getting worse and worse with the proliferation of floodlights. Then someone said,
Absolutely.
Blake, your analogies are killing me with a laughing, crying sign. Do the orange yellow pollinator lights help to reduce impact on fireflies?
So what we know is that the color of the light, it does make a difference. So no light is dramatically better than light. No light is the best, and it's not even close. But if you do have to have some light, what we found is more of like a reddish color light, and definitely not like full spectrum is really really bad. So you know it's kind of one of those things where you're going to have to do this balancing act, right? If you need light for safety, then you're going to want to use like the least harmful light. So if you can avoid the full spectrum light, you want to avoid that. You want to use maybe like what you're saying, this orange or yellow or red colored light. If you can avoid all light together, then that's what you want to do. But you're going to want to find that balance in your own life.
Maybe like a motion light?
Motion detecting lights, yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Okay. My adult niece and nephews have never even seen a firefly, having grown up here in light polluted Hull. So that was just a comment.
Yeah, well, you should
Um,
you should come with me if we're doing a walk.
yeah.
We do it actually nearby. We do some walks pretty close by to Hull. So reach out to
Well,
me.
have any communities banned companies like Mosquito Joe?
As far as I know, they have not.
Okay. Do you still do firefly walks? When and how do you sign up?
We still do firefly walks. I actually have about three firefly walks already booked for this year. We're not going to advertise them yet because they do fill up really, really fast. But if people want more, they can just reach out to me through my email and we could set something up. I try to do a number of them around the county in different locations so that people from different parts of the county have access to it.
Okay. The next one's a comment. Blake, you are a fantastic presenter. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
The next one is, how do the spiders force the males to flash like females?
I'll have to go back and read that study. I actually forget. That's a great question. So I'm gonna have to go back and read that study and try to figure it out. But um, I don't know. I can send you the link to that study. Maybe we could you could read it yourself, or I could read it and email you.
Okay. Do you think the coloration of Pronotum elytra on American carrion
Hmm.
beetle is also mimicry for firefly?
Wow, that's a great observation. I don't know, actually. I'm not sure. It looks very similar. You're right. I'm not sure. It's a really good observation. It's interesting.
And then she said, A plus presentation, A plus plus humor and memes.
Thank you.
I'm not sure what this next one means. Do you sigh, S-Y?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Another person said, thank you. Is there still a Firefly citizen science project?
There is a Firefly Watch, which was run through Mass Audubon, and I feel like it changed hands at some point. But there's still ways that you can sign up for it, and you can monitor fireflies as well.
Okay. On the light, I'm trying to convince my neighbor to switch his bright white lights. That's just
Mm,
a comment.
yeah,
Um, Growing up in the 80s in the Midwest, our families collected fireflies into glass jars to observe them closely and then free them shortly after. Thoughts on this present day?
I think so. It's one of those things where I think that the value of the education you get from observing fireflies is worth more than an individual firefly that might be harmed from that. So it's like it's a definitely my opinion on the matter. I don't think there's any objective right or wrong answer to this, but I think that you have this memory, right, of doing this, and I'm assuming it's a good memory, one that you kind of reflect back on and that you like. And while it is possible that maybe a few of these fireflies might not have made it or might have missed out on their opportunity for love, that is an experience that's going to stick with you. And maybe other people in your family and those families had that same experience and they're going to miss that, right? And so when we talk about fireflies and them disappearing, it's those experiences I think that have so much value, right? And so I think that even in today's world, when we're talking about insects disappearing and we want to conserve them and things like that, I think that doing these things and getting out and connecting with nature and interacting with it, and not, I know it's fragile, right? But is resilient in a lot of ways. And we need people that love nature more than we need to just treat it like this piece of glass that we're afraid to touch. So that's my opinion on it.
Yeah, we did the same thing. How do we provide a good habitat for fireflies and reduce the attractions of ticks?
Um, there is not a good way to do that, really. So a lot of firefly habitat is going to generally be a lot of tick habitat as well. So it's a you're doing things that naturally promote native wildlife, and ticks are native wildlife. So when you're doing things that kind of help the native bees, the native fireflies, native organisms, native like birds and things like that, ticks are part of that. They're part of that equation. They're part of that outcome. And so it's just something that's going to happen. And so my advice to you on this, and this is what I do, is that I protect myself. So first thing I do is I use repellents on myself. I protect myself. And the second thing I do is we have these areas in my yard that are what we call like the tick safe areas. And then we have areas in my yard that are like the tick habitat areas. And so instead of just doing all or nothing, like having a yard that is just all for fireflies or not, we've divided it into what we use. So in the areas that we frequently use, we keep those free of ticks, right? Those are the areas that get mowed and things like that. And then the rest of the areas that we just don't go to that often, that we just don't touch, we just don't touch them. And we know there are sticks there, but also those are the areas that are loaded with butterflies and fireflies and bees. So it's kind of the way you want to view things.
Okay. Someone said, love your hilarious analogies.
Thank you.
Someone else said, thank you, love this and agree with others. Your presentation was awesome. The next person said, the Citizen Science Project is now through Xerces Society. I think it's called Firefly Atlas.
Thank you. Yeah, you're correct on this. That makes a lot of, that's like ringing a bell. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. The next person said, I live in Whitman next to the city of Brockton and saw fireflies in my wooded backyard last summer. There is conservation land called Hobart Meadow at the end of my street. Whoop, it keeps jumping. Let's see. Could the larva be living there, and how far do firefly travel?
Oh, I am almost 100% certain that the firefly larvae are living there. They do not fly very far. They're not, they don't, they're not, at least as far as we know, from what I've read, they don't move too far from where they are. So they're almost certainly there.
Someone else said, I also live in Whitman and have seen them in the field beside the commuter rail on South Ave. The next person said, fantastic presentation and humor. Thank you. And then remember, birds need bugs to feed their young. That probably
Mm.
includes ticks.
Well, we don't really see that happening too much with the birds feeding their young ticks, but I guess it's possible.
The last one says, you are so awesome. Thanks for sharing your immense knowledge once again. You rock, or tick, keep shining your light.
Thank you. I love the pun.
Thank you, Blake. That was awesome. And you can tell everyone really enjoyed it. And thank you to everyone for coming tonight. I would also like to tell you about tomorrow night's presentation, which is Evan Abramson, and he is founder and principal of Landscape Interactions. And he's going to talk about habitat to habitat, transforming landscapes into resilient ecosystems from conception to maintenance. And then I hope you will all join us on Saturday at the Live Expo at Kennedy's Country Gardens. And new this year, we have a shuttle running from Oro, so you can park there and catch our 15-passenger van and stay at the expo. And then Brian will take you back in the van. And the expo is from 10 to 2. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.